going on, guys? It's Brian from TST Industries Garage, and today we're going to be installing these Womet-Tech Evo Shorty Racing Levers on this gorgeous 2017 Yamaha R6. Now, as their name would suggest, these levers are a little bit shorter than your OEM setup. However, with that difference in length, you do get a little bit more feel out of the Womet-Tech levers. They do offer 6 positions of adjustability on both the clutch and brake side, so you can ultimately really fine-tune your ride to your liking. These levers are machined out of aluminum and anodized black. The adjuster is also machined out of aluminum and comes default anodized red. We do offer several different colors for these adjusters so you can really match the accents on your bike, but that is something you'd have to purchase separately and install on your own. Don't worry about the installation, it's super simple, and we already have a video covering that. As far as this installation, you're only going to need 5 tools, and it's going to be super quick, super simple, so let's jump right in. If you are going to be following along with this installation, I do suggest getting out some tools ahead of time so that they're on hand and easy to grab when you need them. We're going to start with a large flathead screwdriver, a ratcheting wrench, an 8mm socket, a 10mm socket, an extension, not necessary, but I choose to use one, and a 10mm box wrench. All right, we're gonna start on the clutch side of this Yamaha R6, and we are going to start this process by turning our bars this way a tiny bit and starting to dial this clutch cable adjuster almost all the way in until bottom out, buying us a lot of slack in that cable. You're gonna wanna line up this slot of the adjuster with this slot of the perch, allowing the cable to easily slip out when we get to that step. Our next step is to grab our 8mm socket, and we're going to loosen the bolt on the back of the clip-on that clamps the perch to the clip-on and keeps it in place. Loosen it just enough to buy us a little bit of adjustability in this perch. Tighten it back up to lock it in position. This will buy us a lot of working room to access this nut on the bottom of that pivot bolt. Our next step is going to be to grab our 10mm socket and loosen the nut on the bottom of the pivot bolt. You're going to want to keep your finger depressed on top of the pivot bolt. Otherwise, it will just continue to spin, as there is a locking feature that keeps the bolt in place when it is fully engaged. As you can see, that little locking feature slips into an accepting slot on the perch, and that keeps this bolt from rotating while you are tightening or loosening this nut. With the pivot bolt out, this will allow us to rotate out the lever, spin it around, get this clutch cable into that slot, turn 90, and release that clutch cable from this lever. From this lever, we do still need one thing, and that is the bushing inside of this lever. We're going to be reusing that on our Womet-Tech Shorty Racing Lever. So now that we do have this bushing out, we are going to take one preventative step, and that is taking a little bit of bearing grease and rubbing that on the contacting surface of this bushing, just for a little bit more longevity out of our lever, a little bit better feel, less creaking. There are many reasons that you'd want to apply bearing grease, and that's what we're going to do. If your bike is as new as this one, you may not need it. This one was very greased up still. We're going to do it just to be extra safe. Apply just a tiny bit to the tip of your finger. Rub that around on the contacting surfaces and insert that into your Womet-Tech clutch lever. Now, you will have a little bit of excess that will squirt out, and you can take that and rub that around on the remaining contacting surfaces of this lever. So now that we have our lever nice and greased up, all the contacting surfaces have a good amount of grease on them, we're going to take, I have here some needle nose pliers, just something to grab onto the end of this clutch cable, as it is under a little bit of tension by default. So we're just going to pull that out, grab it with my hand, then come back over to my lever, and very similar to the removal process of the OEM, we're going to drop the end of that cable into the accepting feature on the lever, turn 90 degrees to get that cable in that channel. Then we're going to come back around. Now I should point out one thing that you are going to have to be careful for in this installation, and that is your clutch sensor. You do not want to bend this or break this little knob off, so you want to be very careful when installing, as this surface interferes with that and tells your bike when the clutch is engaged or not. So we're going to come back around, being very careful of that lever, switch rather, and we're going to line up the bushing with the slot for the pivot bolt. We're going to take our pivot bolt and drop this straight down through the perch, down through the lever and the bushing. Make sure that that little locking feature is engaged, and hand thread on the locking nut until you reach that locking feature and can't do it by hand anymore. We're going to come back down, grab our 10mm socket, make sure we are tightening, and then come back up here, keeping our finger on top so that locking feature stays engaged, and we're going to tighten this thing up. Now the manual calls for about 8.9 foot-pounds of torque. I don't actually torque levers. I find that the stock specifications for torque can be a little bit too tight and cause your lever to bind. If your lever is binding, just go ahead and back off that nut a tiny, tiny bit, and you should have a very free pulling lever. Now while we're over here, we're going to come full lock left, extending the cable as long as it ever is, and we're going to come over to our adjuster and back this out of the perch a little bit to the optimal range for our clutch. Some people like a little bit more slack, some people like a little bit less. All you want to make sure is that this channel is not lined up with the channel in the front of the perch, as you then risk your clutch cable actually coming out. So you want to go ahead and turn that back around, check your adjustability one more time. We're going to come back to center, grab our 8mm socket, and we're going to lower this lever back down on our clip-on. We're going to come back for a final adjustment when I sit on the bike, but for now, let's move over to the brake side. So coming over to the brake side, this is going to be very, very similar to the clutch side. Few minor differences. I'll walk you through them as we get to them. We're going to start again by grabbing our 8mm socket. Make sure that we're loosening here. We're going to come back to the 2 pinch bolts as opposed to the 1 on the clutch side. We're going to loosen this perch a tiny bit off the clip-on just to buy us a little bit of adjustability. Move it up, switch our ratchet, tighten that back up just a tiny bit so it doesn't slide down on us. Then we're going to grab our flathead and our 10mm box wrench, again making sure that we're loosening here. We're going to take our flathead, insert it into the top of the pivot bolt, bring our box wrench down on the bottom, and start to break that nut loose. Once it's loose enough, you can take it off by hand, set that down to the side, and then we're actually going to have to unscrew this pivot bolt from the perch as it is threaded down on the bottom of that master cylinder. Once you've fully disengaged the threads on the pivot bolt, that pops right out, and so does your lever. Go ahead and set this to the side. You won't need that any longer. We're going to grab our Womet-Tech racing lever. We're going to, again, get a little bit of grease. Grease up our contacting surfaces. That one. And then we're also going to grease up our pivot bolt just a little bit. So now that we have our lever nice and greased up, we're going to want to locate the barrel inside of our lever. That barrel is going to interface with this piston rod that comes out from your master cylinder. You're going to want to make sure that that bearing is open facing and that this rod can insert straight in with no conflict. If that is the case, we can go ahead and put our lever on, make sure that that rod slips down in, bringing us close to the position that we're going to want. We're going to grab our pivot bolt, depress that lever a tiny, tiny bit, making sure that our surfaces are lined up on the inside, and drop this bolt straight through. Always start the threading by hand to make sure that you have not cross thread. Then we're going to go ahead, grab our flathead again, and start to screw this down. Once you have bottomed out that bolt, you're going to go ahead and grab your lock nut again, come down to the bottom of that bolt, start the threading by hand once again, hit that locking feature, grab our box wrench, grab our flathead, insert the flathead, and start to tighten this bolt back down. Now the manual does call for 8.9 foot-pounds of torque. However, I find that that's a little tight and that can cause some binding issues. I tighten it down until I see fit. That is a locking nut, so if you do tighten it down and give it a nice little crank, it will stay on there, absolutely. So now that we have both our levers installed, I've hopped up on the bike with my 8mm socket and ratchet, and we're going to adjust the angle at which both of these levers sit. We're going to do that by loosening these bolts on the back of this perch just enough to give us a little bit of play. We're going to position it somewhere that seems fit, right about there. And then we're going to come back and tighten these back down. While we're over on the brake side, I'm going to play with my adjustability on the lever itself. That seems a little bit too close for me. I'm going to try 3. Still a little bit close, maybe 4. That feels a bit better. I think I'll leave it there. Man, that is one stiff feeling lever. Let's go ahead and do the same process on our clutch side. So now on our clutch side, we only have the 1 pinch bolt to worry about as opposed to the 2 on the brake. Loosen that up a tiny bit. Make sure we have some adjustability there. Kind of position it wherever fits for you. Hold it there. And tighten that perch back down onto your clip-on. We're going to do one last inspection, make sure everything's tight, make sure everything's torqued down. Check the left, full lock left, check for that lever play. Full lock right, nothing interferes, nothing hits. I want to reiterate that your levers are your lifeline. Your brake, your clutch, very, very important pieces of your motorcycle. If you guys hit any snags during this installation, please seek the help of a professional. These are some of the most important parts on your bike. All right, guys, that's going to conclude our installation of these Womet-Tech Evo Shorty Racing Levers on this beautiful 2017 R6. As you can tell, they accent this bike perfectly. I love the look of a shorty lever. The black anodized just matches everything on this bike so much better than that silver from the OEM. And you really cannot surpass the amount of adjustability that you get out of these levers on both the brake and the clutch side. If you like this video, go ahead and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. And if you like this product, visit our website at tstindustries.com for more awesome products just like this. Get out there and ride, guys.